Hello. So we are live for what I think is the sixth episode of the Geeky Pastimes podcast, and today I am joined by Freeman. So Freeman, if you'd like to say a couple of words, who are you?
Morning. I'm Freeman. Hi. Um, I'm just a fan of Geeky, really.
Oh yeah.
I've been watching Geeky since Geeky started solving all the mysteries with Mr. Jack Frags on Call of Duty, and yeah. Otherwise, I work as a community manager in the games industry. I currently work for a company called CI Games. I have worked for folks like EA in the past. Worked a lot with Battlefield. A lot with Battlefield. I'm an ambassador for Special Effect, and I stream over on Twitch to raise money for the charity.
Yep.
Which since 2019, I think we've raised £100,000 for the
Oh
charity.
wow, that's amazing.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to check him out on Twitch, it is Part Welsh over on Twitch. And he does. Do you still do the pub quizzes?
Yeah, they're a bit more infrequent these days, just because they rely on my brother to make them, and he does a wonderful job with them. But we've done so many of them now, and I think in Lee's defense, people just donate money no matter what we do.
That's
so Lee's
true.
like, well, what's the point of doing the pub quiz anymore? So we like to break them out for special occasions. So I think we've done 2 so far this year, and there'll be loads more. But we have been mixing it up more lately.
They're absolutely awesome. And yeah, if you give him a follow on his channel and you see one of those is coming up, definitely get involved. Stuff like that is surprisingly rare on like Twitch and YouTube, like the idea of just doing a quiz format, but it's a super fun way to spend an evening. And obviously Special Effect is an awesome charity. First, before we get into talking about the main topic of today, which is going to be live service games, I just want to talk about what sort of games are we playing at the moment. What sort of games are you playing? I don't actually know.
I mean, I spent about 4 or 5 hours last night playing Battlefield with my friend Johnny, and then Jack jumped in actually the last bit and played it. It's weird, really. I worked at that game for so long, and you'd think you'd reach a point where you're just like, I don't know. People tend to compartmentalize their lives, don't they? Just
Yeah.
move on from things when they move away from it. Can't stop playing it lately.
As a community manager, do you get much time to actually be playing the game? Like, is that...
You have to make the time. That
Yeah.
is the thing. Like, my rule used to be, like, there's like different companies always do it differently, but for the most part, majority of video game companies, whether they're building a game or whether it's a live service game that's out, you'll always do some form of playtesting in the day. Like at DICE, you playtest normally once a day, sometimes twice a day, for about an hour. And you do that every day. And then some days, if you've got like a major build or a major release coming up you want to test, there'd be a 2-hour play test that's much bigger. My rule used to be, if someone cancelled a meeting, I immediately jumped into the game and started playing it. That was my rule on it, and I tried to export that rule to people in the studio. Yeah, you have to make the time, because it's an exhausting job, and when you get to the end of the day, it's, well, I need to catch up with the rest of life now, and it's difficult, because if you jump into then playing the game that you're supporting all the time, it's like I'm not actually switching off from work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I probably do play it more or as much now than I was playing it when I was working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, other games that I'm kind of playing at the minute, I move about so much. I got into playing Stellaris again because I've been on a real big Star Trek kick because of Picard.
That's the big, is that like the 4X type thing?
Big grand strategy type game, yeah. It's overwhelming, and it's one of these games where, I can't remember when it originally came out, but they are very good as a studio for keeping it fresh and updating it, and it's very intimidating if you play it, and you often, like Civilization, you'll play a good week or 2 weeks just chipping away at a save. Then you'll just call it quits for a few months. Then you'll come back and you'll go, oh, they've literally redone all the UI. They've changed this has moved. I'm scared now, and you end up switching off for a long time.
I've just never been able to break into Stellaris. It's one of those games where it's like, I love the idea of it, and I love reading about, when people have done like articles on like PC Game and stuff about the amazing times they've had in it, and then I get into it and it's like, oh, this is a lot. Same with like Galactic Civilizations and Total War and stuff. Like Civilization, I've played since I was a kid, so I can cope with that, but everything else is just like, I'd rather live vicariously through other people who know what they're doing with it.
Civ's better for it because Civ will kind of hold your hand and guide you a little bit on it, and you'll always feel good getting into a campaign and playing it. Stellaris, I had to have a friend
have a teacher.
take me. Yeah, like because I said I've got it, and I think it literally was. I think it was one night during the pandemic. It was probably about 11:30. It was one of those, let's go to bed, and we were just chatting about stuff, and I can't remember what we were doing, but it was Bong from Two Angry Gamers. He just said to me on TeamSpeak one night. He just said, "You ever played Stellaris?" I went, "No, I've had it for years, but I've never played it." He went, "Right, come on then," and then it was 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the one who was guiding me through it and explaining it to me. And that's what it took, because the game doesn't do a good job of that. And I think it's a real shame. They've never really cracked that. But this is the thing of Stellaris fans get so into it that they'll happily go out of their way to teach the next person to do it. So it becomes like a passing of the baton, a torch that kind of spreads. And I guess it's true of their entire community.
It is like, I mean, that's been a thing with like Paradox games, you know, like Crusader King's always been like that. I mean, I was talking to Angry Gamers. It's like I've seen a lot of Jack's videos of them playing Star Citizen together, and it's like that's a game that I've owned for ages now, and
but
it just seems to. Yeah, I've never played it because since the only thing you could do was wander around the hangar, and then I see their videos, and it's like I need to get into a game with them, and then they can show me how to play it. But then I see like what they've had to go through with Jack, where every video seems to be them trying to save him from some horrific accident. And it's like, oh, I don't know if they need to go through that again with somebody else.
But that's just the usable content that Jack puts out. The majority of it is unfortunately dodging bugs. It's hiding.
Oh, really? From I've seen the physics
things
bugs,
that go wrong. Yeah, look, it's entertaining and it's it's good in a way for people to see what game development's often like.
Yeah.
Because people might complain about the finished product not being polished enough, not being this enough. But it's a lot scarier when you see how the sausage gets made.
And it's really interesting as well, seeing like the different scale of games, because like the only sort of new game I've been playing since yesterday when I was doing this was Raven's Watch, which is a new game. People who want to watch a video, it's on YouTube, the VOD from yesterday, and that is a co-op roguelike game. A bit sort of, the combat's a little bit like Hades, but after playing it, it doesn't actually play that much like Hades at all. It's made by the people who did Curse of the Dead Gods. And that is a much smaller scope game. And so they just released it. Well, it's coming into early access tomorrow, but they released it to like creators to play it yesterday. And it's only the first chapter, like 6 characters. And it's super polished. Like essentially, like that is a game that, in terms of the quality of what's there, other than the fact that when you leave a game, it sometimes crashes to desktop, the actual gameplay all works perfectly. And there's no bugs or anything like that. And I think a lot of people play games like that are super early, you know, or Stardew Valley or Dwarf Fortress or RimWorld or stuff like that. And they're like, well, why can't, you know, Call of Duty do this? Why can't Star Citizen do this? Like, why have they got so many bugs? And it's like, the scale of things is so completely different. Like, well, I mean, what they're doing design-wise, I'm sure is very, very complicated, but it's nice to play something that's just a smaller scope. I think I've always been a bit of an advocate for games existing like that, where rather than being super ambitious like Star Citizen is, just trying to do something very small but getting it right. Like I like it when games exist like that. You know, it's nice to have both, but I'm really a big fan of games like cutting it down a little bit more to the bare bones. Like with racing games, I'm very excited about the new Forza Motorsport, because it's like there's no open world, there's no sort of massive MMO aspects to it or anything like that. It's going to be cars racing around a track. It's like, that's cool. That'll like work. I'll understand that. Like, that'll be nice. Be good. But talking about massive scope, the main thing we wanted to talk about today is games as a service. So games as a live service. And this is a really kind of weird issue for video gaming now, because I was just before I started this, I thought, oh, I'll just Google like a list of games as live service so I don't miss something.
All of them.
Yeah, like it's literally, if you literally Google list of live service games, and Google does that automatic thing where it's like, hey, you want a list? Here you go. It's literally like Destiny, Apex, Fortnite, Rainbow Six Siege, World of Warcraft, Genshin Impact, Warframe, Final Fantasy XIV, Warzone, Dota, Path of Exile, Counter-Strike, Sea of Thieves. It's like, that's basically like the top rankings on Twitch, isn't it? Like that is all of the popular games. Oh, League of Legends on there as well. Like there's not many games that crack through into like content creation and stuff like that aren't live service at this point, which is a very weird thing. How would you define a live service game? What would you say makes something live service as opposed to just a game that gets updates?
It is funny, isn't it? Because if you think back to when we were growing up and looking at games, the update you get for a game would be an expansion pack. It would be that big and you maybe get 1 or 2 and then it'd be kind of done. Yeah, because like, are we just classifying a game based on something that's got a constant money stream into it, whether it's a battle pass or subscription, or is it just a game that just doesn't stop evolving and doesn't stop growing?
And that's like a positive way to look at it, because I think there's a perception online of like live service games aren't games that don't stop evolving; they're games that aren't done yet.
Yeah,
it's like games that are released before they're finished.
Yeah, I think it's very rare that, like, some games obviously do target that, and it becomes just you get games that go into early access, like say like a Hell Let Loose or something, where it does develop in front of your eyes, and then it becomes a question of like, when it becomes so playable and people are enjoying it, what is the point where you just put the flag down and go, right, version 1.0 done, moving on, next we're doing this, and it hasn't changed. It's still doing what it's set out to do.
And the revenue for that must be super tough. Like, you look at something like the games that used to do that, like DayZ was one that I got super into.
Yeah.
And DayZ didn't have any microtransactions. It didn't have anything else. It was like, you buy it when they released it. Well, once they stopped being a mod and they actually released the proper game, you buy it, and then that's it. You just keep on playing it, hoping that they update it, hoping that they do it. And they've already got your money. And at some point, everyone who wants to play DayZ will have bought it. Pretty much. Yeah. So, like, why would they keep on developing it? Like, why? What's in it for them to keep on making that game?
And that's the business model those types of games go through. They go through, like with Hell Let Loose, it's not about. There's no battle. I don't think there's a battle pass. I know they've had a few updates since I last played, but there's nothing to catch you into the next purchase for it. It's just you're going to buy the game, and the only way we're going to get more money from you is by impressing you enough to say to your friend, have you played Hell Let Loose? Come play Hell Let Loose with me. It's really good. And that's how they make their money. They make their money by impressing you so much that you become an advocate of what they do. And you start to bring in, it's like a pyramid scheme almost when I'm describing it like this, isn't it? Good Lord. You get 3 of your friends to get 5 of their friends. That's what they kind of rely into. And again, that all comes down to their development costs and their overheads of if they've passed a point where it became, they'd already covered the bulk of what it costs to make the game, then their next revenue is all bonus, which is why they're happy to make a new map, a new gun, a new this, a new that. Because if it causes, because everyone does that, don't they? When a new game gets an update out, you go, oh, you've seen so-and-so's got an update. Let's go back and play that this week, which introduces the next 10 people to it. Or it moves the person who was on the fence last time of, oh yeah, I do want to pick this up, to go, well, I'll pick it up now.
I wonder if that's why you see it so much more with multiplayer games than single-player games. Like, I found it really weird that Baldur's Gate 3 has kind of done that model of, it's been in early access for ages, but it's like, I'm going to play that game when it's done. Like, I want to play through a story. I don't want to play this yet at all. But that also means I think a lot of my friends are the same, so none of us are recommending it to each other, because it's like, well, why would we bother? But a multiplayer game, yeah, you're right. Like, if I play an early access multiplayer game, a lot of the time I'll be trying to convince everyone I know, being like, hey, you should come play this too. Like, this is fun. This is worth your time and money. And then it expands. And those games where you can have, like, huge numbers of people playing, like Atlas and Ark and stuff like that, it's, hopefully for them, it'll kick off and you'll have tons of people playing. But you've obviously got the big risks, which lots of these games suffer from, of if you put all of your eggs in the basket of multiplayer and recommending people, what happens when there's not enough people to play? What happens when the servers are dead and there's, the world is empty, which sadly happens quite a lot to them. And then obviously there's the other type of live service game, which I don't really know when this started, where it's like, every week there's something new to buy. Every week there's something new to play. Like, I don't know, what was Fortnite the first one to do this?
Fortnite was certainly the most aggressive at it. You really would need a video game historian to fully pick at the strings and say who was doing it. But in terms of the weekly, Fortnite, it's so easy to forget the impact that they had and try to remember what they did to do it. They were probably a development team of maybe 80 to 100 people making that original Save the World Fortnite mode. Yeah. And then when they went, hang on a minute, this Battle Royale stuff, it's the way to go, they shifted pretty much the whole of Epic onto it.
That was
They
such an
just
insane decision to
started
make.
dragging people off projects and just said, "You're going to do this now. You're going to do
Yeah.
that." And that is an insane. You don't ever hear of that type of stuff.
Mm.
They have the vision to know this is where it's going to go, and then they just kept growing. They just kept saying more people, more people, more people, and got so aggressive with content that it stunned the whole industry into a. But it takes months to make one model, to have it pass through art teams, to get it up to standard, to have it make sure it's bug tested and all of this. And the crunch that they have reportedly gone through in the press to make that content cycle be that aggressive.
There was a really cool
bananas.
There's a really cool post that I saw from someone who'd worked at Destiny that I saw lots of people making fun of, but I understood it quite well, where they were saying they didn't want to make too much content and too much good quality content because it would set expectations. That if they had a season where they released incredible stuff every week, that's what people would expect forever. And they were like, we can't.
There's a very human cost to that kind of development cycle, where it's a look, we can do it, but by the time we get to the finish line, let's say we're going to add 10 new things over the course of the next 10 months. And everyone's like, wow, thank goodness. That's amazing. That's so awesome. You get to the end of the 10 months and everyone's literally hands on their knees, standing there, panting, going, well, we did it. Good job. And they're like, where's the next 10 months? It's like, oh, no, you don't understand. We had a 6-month lead getting to that 10 months. We were sort of prepared for it. We've exhausted all of that now. We've cut every corner. If you want things for the next 10 months, we need to slow it right down to catch back up, because there's no way to keep up that pace.
But then that's hard for the players to understand, and that's hard for players to like deal with. Like, they've bought into a game being like, well, this is awesome. There's always something new to try. And then that sort of hits a wall, and they're like, oh. I mean, it's with Call of Duty, there's obviously a big thing that my community's been interested in. I've seen it already where Season 3 is coming out next week, and I've already seen people being like, what's next for DMZ? Like, they'd better do something big for DMZ. And it's like, last season, which was 2 months ago, we got a new map, we got missions for all of the maps, and they redid every mission, which is, what, like 120 missions, something like that? And that was 2 months ago, and now already people are like, but what are they going to do this time? Like, what's the new thing? It's like, that can't be sustainable. Like, you can't have that.
And that other map was entirely done by a separate studio, wasn't it?
High Moon. Yeah.
It's like, well, they don't have another studio just lying around going, actually, these guys.
Well, supposedly they've got 14 studios working on Call of Duty, don't they now? Like, that's like, and I imagine a lot of them are support studios and stuff, you know, like doing
it doesn't surprise me that that's what it takes, though. And that's what Epic introduced to our industry with Fortnite, is this need of, if you want to keep pace and if you want to feed that beast and make people never have to ask the question of, but what is next? You've got to go that hard on talent and management and just go, right, 14 studios, let's go.
And you look at like the companies that are really, you know, succeeding in terms of the insane player numbers, and it's like, you know, Activision are doing that, 14 studios in Call of Duty. Epic are doing it with, you know, they used to make a bunch of different games and they cancelled tons of games. You know, Paragon and stuff just got completely shut down. The Unreal Tournament thing got shut down for the sake of Fortnite. Ubisoft have, I hate to think how many studios Ubisoft have now, but when you look at the credits for like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which had a massive live service model, there's like 15 studios working on that. EA, like, obviously have had loads of studios all working on one thing. You know, just heard about Vince Zampella's now in charge of like what he's doing, Respawn, which is doing Jedi Fallen Order and Apex Legends and whatever else they're working on, and the Battlefield universe now, which is, you know, a Battlefield universe, not just one game. It's like there's a huge amount of kind of, these companies can do it, and then that's what fans expect. And I assume there's something similar going on with Genshin Impact and stuff like that. But then, like, what about the other companies that are trying to get into this and trying to make a new game? You know, they release a new game and people will immediately be like, well, it's not free to play. Like, why aren't there updates every month? Why aren't there updates every week? And if you've got a studio of 20 people, like, that's impossible. That's not something you could ever crack into and compete with. But, like, I don't know what another smaller studio could do about that, really.
Yeah, it's just about setting the right ambitions for it. Stardew Valley is probably the best example of it. You think about the release schedule they went on for how they developed their game. He went on. Yeah, that's the stunning thing. It's, I'm going to work on this next and it'll be ready when it's ready. Yeah. No Man's Sky is much the same, you know, as much as they copped all the flack in the world for the experience that players had with that when it launched.
Which I still find insane. I really thought No Man's
too.
Sky was spectacular when it
Yeah,
launched. Like,
same.
I was lucky enough that I wasn't even streaming them, but I got an early copy just because the shop sent it to me early. So I got to play it for like a week before the day one patch came out. And I had an awesome time. I loved it. I was like, I've never seen something like this before.
Yeah.
I kind of thought it was what he'd said it was going to be.
Yeah, I thought it was too.
But people had hyped it up in their minds of like what
Yes.
it could be, and like then ended up being disappointed, which seemed bizarre. But yeah, that was a spectacular game. And then they've somehow managed to do so much more with it. And that, I don't think, you don't buy stuff for No Man's Sky, do you? You don't buy like season passes or expansions. And they're quite a small team, like in Guildford. They're not.
I don't, maybe they do have a premium currency. I know they've got some kind of shop in the game, but I can't,
really?
I don't know if that currency is an earned currency or a paid currency. I think it is probably earned, but I don't know. But yeah, they are a small team. It's all passion for them. It's not an apology. It is just passion.
Yeah.
And they do churn out big updates, but they don't focus on going, we're taking you on the next adventure. They take you on this journey of, we're going to help you re-enjoy the adventure you've already had. They've got a very different focus, but it's a laser sharp focus that lets them work to the schedule that they want to, because they probably managed to put out 4 sizable updates a year.
Yeah. And when you say sizable, I mean, they are huge, like as in game-changing stuff. Like, you know, they'll suddenly be like, oh, now you can have like an aircraft carrier type thing, a spaceship carrier, whatever you want to call it. And then the next update, they'll be like, oh, now you can have a fleet of them all doing their own missions and stuff like that. It's stuff that just changes the way you play the game. It's not, oh, here's another skin, or here's, you know, a new color spaceship or something like that. Which is just mind-boggling that they can do that. But again, it does make me worry about other smaller studios. Like, I've seen so many FPS games, especially over the last 10 years, where they've had a really solid idea, they've had a really cool, like, hook to it, and then they've released, and it's been like, oh, you're trying to charge 20 quid for that. That's too much. This should be free to play. Or this doesn't have a battle pass. Like, what's the point of playing? Like, where's the progression? And that's like, it's kind of heartbreaking to see like all of these games that should do well, really, just being swallowed by the bigger franchises that offer more for less money. Like, you know, you can play Warzone for free and get basically an infinite amount of content out of it. You can do the same thing for Dota. You can play League of Legends. You can play like, I don't know if Counter-Strike's free. I assume Counter-Strike goes free.
It's free. It didn't used to be, but it has been for the last couple of years.
And it's like all of those things. It's not just that, you know, that like, oh, players are stupid and not looking out for these games. It's like, it's a hard sell for a player to be like, oh, you can play this huge polished game for free that has an insane amount of content, or you can buy this game that's not going to have that. Like, there was a game. Did you ever play that first-person shooter that was? I'm trying to remember what it was called, where it's like on a time loop. There was like teams of 2 or 3.
I get them confused. I know the one you're talking about. I think Frontier published it, but yeah, there was Splitgate, which I think is the Portal-like one.
Yeah,
and then I always confuse it with that time loop one. I think didn't they shut down recently or
Quantum something? Was it? I don't know. But yeah, I think they shut it down just because there was like it ended up with like 16 people playing it. You know, you looked at Steam charts and there wasn't enough people playing it. And it was like, that was one of the most innovative games I've played in ages. And it was super polished. It worked really, really well. Like, the controls were really good. And everyone who I showed it to and everyone who I got to play it with was just like, oh my God, this game's amazing. But then it was like, but there's nothing to do. There's like, you know, there's a basic ranking system. There's no unlocks. There's no battle pass to grind through. There's no new content coming really other than new maps, I guess, occasionally. And it was just everyone just kind of drifted away from it. And it's like, that's so sad, but I don't know.
It is really sad, especially for the people who probably did love it, because you wouldn't get that experience in any other game. And it's always a shame when the game doesn't reach that mark of just, we've got enough to survive on this. Like, For Honor's a fascinating one. Every now and again, I see a tweet from For Honor going, we've just updated this game. And I've been like, I forgot this game existed. Which is a ridiculous thing to say about it. But Ubisoft, again, are amazing for this, of just this long tail of, we've got a very niche thing that we don't have competition for.
Yeah.
And we get to decide how this little tiny thing grows. And they're still making For Honor. They're still developing content for it.
And For Honor's like, and it's high quality. Like, For Honor's awesome. Like, and there's some really good stuff in it. That game, by the way, just for chat's sake, was Quantum Gate.
Quantum Gate.
Yeah.
This is why I probably got it confused with Splitgate so much.
Yeah. And then there's something called Lemnis as well.
Lemnis Gate.
Quantum League, and then Lemnis Gate. Yeah, Lemnis Gate was also good, but Quantum League was just amazing. But yeah, Ubisoft, I've had this argument so many times where people, like, oh, Ubisoft, like, they're not creative. They just release Far Cry over and over again, but call it different things. And it's like, have you played Roller Champions? And, like, they do make a Trackmania.
They take way more risks, more than anyone else. Way more risks.
And they make some really cool games. Like, Roller Champions was really fun, but, a very kind of niche game. But they did pump it out as a live service game. It was very much like, hey, you can start playing this, and then you can buy this battle pass, and you can do this. And we've got this roadmap stretching out. Riders Republic, another awesome game. But then it was very much like, hey, like, we'll keep on adding stuff seasonally. And it's like, that's almost like, with those companies, it seems like they're tying their own noose a little bit, where they're saying, when they release the game, often a lot of the big companies do the deluxe editions or the collect editions, and they're like, hey, you get the first year's content included. And then if the game doesn't sell well, like, who are you making that content for? Like, how many people are really looking forward to the new season of Roller Champions or the new season of Riders Republic? There's still probably 100 people working on it, but like, who are they doing it for? There's probably more people working on it than there are people playing it, like, at launch. It's just crazy. But then I guess they have to honor those commitments, and sometimes it works. Like, For Honor's a good example of a game that, like, found a community, and I think won people over. That if they made a For Honor 2, there's a lot of people on the internet that would be like, oh no, yeah, you should get in on this. Like, For Honor's really
and that's
good.
Probably the play that they've got at this point. Of they must have it in the back of their head of, we can do a For Honor 2, and if we did it this way, we'd do it differently.
Yeah.
And so it's worth staying with For Honor, because you do want that moment where at the start of it, people go, yeah, they kept updating that game for like 4 years after it came out. That's actually really cool. I wish my game updated for 4 years after it came out, because I've been playing my game, whatever that game is, and my game doesn't do that. Doesn't so-and-so play that game? They do. Let me ask them, what do you think about this game? Oh, I love it. I'll teach you. When this is out, we'll play it together. And it's changed everything versus that experience of, For Honor, I forgot about that game. Didn't that flop? Wasn't that a failure? Well, there's no point looking at For Honor 2, is there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if Epic came out with, was it Epic who made Lawbreakers? There's Gears of Cliff Blazinski and stuff like that, and it's like, if they came out with a Lawbreakers 2, people would be like, oh yeah, I don't want to touch that. Like, I remember what happened last time. Like, that would suck. And like, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, I genuinely, as much as I can, like, see how much some of these games of service things can be bad, because like, we talked a little while ago on a podcast a few days ago about the idea that I worry about the addictive side of games. I worry about, like, the feeling that you need to be playing a game for 200 hours, and like, you need to be coming back every week, and you need to play this to keep on top of it, the fear of missing out and the sort of grind and stuff like that. I genuinely think that's like a social problem. It's like, it's almost to the point of being a social evil. Of like, I used to, when I was a teacher, I used to have loads of like teenage kids that would play these games, and they would literally be like coming to school the next day. They'd be super tired. They didn't do any other activities. They didn't have any hobbies, because all they did was play Dota, or all they did was play, Fortnite or whatever, Roblox. And it was like, this is kind of scary. You hear about it, Call of Duty, a new Call of Duty comes out, and people are like, oh, I'm going to grind out the maximum camo. I'm just going to like play this game for like 12 hours a day for the next 2 months until I've got this thing. And then they'll release another thing for you to grind for, and then they'll release another thing, and they'll just keep you like trapped in this. And it's like, as much as I understand how bad that can be, I also quite like it in a way. I'm also like, if a game comes out and it's got something to work towards, I'm like, oh, it's got, I'm excited about Warzone Ranked coming out, so I can get a badge that says I'm like a gold player. And I'm like, well, I can't wait to do that.
They all come with the accolade and the social status and the clout of, I am the best, I am the coolest, I did the thing. Well, like when we were growing up and playing games, like I was a kid who played games all the time, but the experience you could have in a game was limited. It reached a finite point, and it'd always be the one I always go back to, and that that shows the comparison. Is I remember like I'd score a cool goal in FIFA 99 and go, that was so cool. And then I'd pick up my football and go to my mate's house, knock on his door, let's go to the park and let's recreate this cool goal I just scored in the game because it was cool. Because there was no way of me showing that to him. Like, there was no sharing a clip. There was no posting it to YouTube and having a look at it later. It was gone. So you did kind of live more in the imagination side of things. Whereas today, we don't probably appreciate the challenge enough of it as adults because our free time is our own, or for again each of us in our different ways, we come to video games for the purpose of work, and so we experience them so much more. But you think about the person who works at the factory doing laser milling and comes home at the end of the day, cooks their dinner, does their little jobs, and goes, right, I'm just gonna put this on for an hour and just have a little play of this. That hour quickly becomes into 2 to 3 hours because it's, but I've just got 2 extractions. There's an extraction streak bonus if I get 2 more.
Well, you've got to update it first as well.
Yeah, and then I talk to my friends on this thing, and it doesn't stop. And for kids, that must be so dangerous because that is what they talk about on the playgrounds. That is that I got this skin. I'm so cool. You didn't get that skin. You're not good enough.
There's also the weird thing. Just you reminded me talking about when we used to play games like in the late 90s and early 2000s. If you were someone who was really into games, if you were one of those kids that played a lot of video games, it was actually bad for you to be good at games. Like,
yes, absolutely.
I remember like being quite good at like Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing and GoldenEye and Wave Race. And that meant if I had friends over and they played, it wasn't that much fun because like I was just destroying them. And they were like, oh, I don't really want to play this. And I wasn't really enjoying it because it's kind of embarrassing. If you're playing Mario Kart and you're like lapping someone, it's like, oh, this kind of sucks. Whereas now kids don't have that experience because they're going online and there's always going to be someone better. Like there's always going to be someone who's just going to beat them. And that like brings this whole competitive mindset where it's not about, oh, can you have a fair race? Can you have a fun race? It's about like, I want to be the best and I'm never going to be the best. Like, I mean, I'm sure there were people our age who like, got into, Street Fighter 2 tournaments and things like that and did compete. But again, you could probably become the best Street Fighter 2 player in your local area, in your local arcade or whatever, pretty easily compared to being the best Street Fighter 5 player now. Like, that's an insane different thing. And that idea of having to like practice and having to grind, I still find that quite alien. Like, I find it weird. A lot of the creators that I play with, a lot of streamers I play with, play Call of Duty 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And it's like, they're really, really good at the game. And I play, maybe 2 hours a day and I'm nowhere near as good at the game. And I'm kind of like, I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel bad about not being very good at the game. But I think the game itself is like pushing you to think like, no, you need to be the best. You need to win. As you said, you need to get win streaks. You need to get a nuke now in Call of Duty. And that's like a very different mindset where it's like, if you're not putting the practice in, you're a failure. You're not playing this game right unless you're amazing at it. And that's a weird thing to tell kids. Like, that's a weird thing to tell, well, and adults, to be fair. It's a weird thing to tell anyone that like, you need to be good at this game. And like, Nintendo never told you have to be good at Mario Kart or Smash Brothers or anything like that. They were just like, hey, this is a toy, have fun with it. Like, mess around. Do what you want. Yeah. It's a very, very strange kind of thing. And I think like a lot of, with the battle passes in particular, a lot of it is like giving you that sense that you're getting better at the game by making your levels go up.
It's the pat on the head of, don't worry, you are still doing something. You're still achieving. You're still getting a reward for it. You still feel good about it. When you turn off the game at the end of the night, you then go, stupid game. Get angry about it, and then you worry about it the next day, and then just don't load it up again. Every time you're thinking, oh, but there's new challenges, actually, new things unlocked. Well, at least if I do the little tiny challenges of pick up 2 hats and pet 2 ducks, well, at least I've done something, even if I didn't win.
Yeah, and your battle pass level is going on based on time. And it's like, okay, I've got to do 100 battle pass levels, and I've got 2 months to do it. I think like the Call of Duty battle pass takes like 45 hours of playtime, something like that. I'd say for like most normal people, 45 hours in 2 months is quite a lot of time to spend in a video game. Like that's that's a significant, especially if like, one thing we haven't really talked about yet is like these live service games, even if you love it, even if you love the battle pass progression, you love the challenges, you love petting the ducks and all of that sort of stuff, you love ranking up and getting better. It also stops you from being able to play more than one game. For, most people, it's like, I really love Call of Duty. I play a lot of Call of Duty. I also really love Destiny. And I also, I'm really looking forward to Diablo. I can't play 3 of those games, and I literally this is my full-time job, and I don't have time to play those 3 games. Like, that sucks. It's really hard to
You reach a
do.
point where you have to pick and choose, and it's a pity because the thing you probably enjoy the most doing, you end up doing the least of.
Yeah.
But I'd probably just enjoy sitting down and playing World of Warcraft and just hammering away at a few quests and getting this done and ticking those boxes and just working towards one thing on a regular basis. But because my friend will just go, should we just jump on and play this for a little bit? We're spoiled.
Oh yeah,
we're beyond
100%.
spoiled. We have one of the richest diets. You think about how it's not anymore. Game Pass has ended that offer, but Game Pass is £1.
Yeah,
and you've got an absolute treasure trove of just games you can be playing, and you do just have to go. Yeah, but this is a timed event. This ends tomorrow, and that goes away. And if I do it today, it's double XP on this, so it actually makes life easier. It means I don't have to play it next week.
Yeah,
you have to schedule. You have to schedule the video games. You have to pick what you're looking forward to. And unfortunately, I've reached that point. There's a lot of games that I'm just happy to go. Nope. Like games like Hogwarts came out at the start of the year and just went, what's the point? I know I don't like open world RPG games anymore. I know that if I start playing them, I just reach a point where I'm just like, yeah, I'm bored of this now.
Yeah.
And so I move on. Assassin's Creed, as much as I appreciate so much of the craft of what makes these games, and as much as I value, like Valhalla is unashamedly something like 80 hours to finish.
Yeah.
That's rare. We should support that behavior in a video game. But I know I won't ever finish it, so I don't play it. And so I just go, but what am I going to enjoy playing this week? I'm going to play Counter-Strike with my friends on Friday night. Great, that's Friday night sorted. Tuesday night is Battlefield reset night for weekly, so I'm going to jump on and play that. What am I going to fill the time with? And there's always one new game coming out. Like Everspace 2 goes to full release this week, and I've ignored its entire early access cycle because I don't want to play early access games if I can avoid it. That's out on Thursday, so it's like, right, that's 3 games, and I'm probably still going to end up playing 2 more games this week.
Yeah.
There's no time. There's no time to just play the thing that you love doing the most.
I think I've I basically enjoy nearly every type of game other than sports games. I've never really got into sports games, but I play basically everything else, and I enjoy everything else. And I've kind of got to grips with the idea that I'm just happy either putting games on easy, that I'll quite happily play through a story-based game on easy, like a single-player game, or just not finishing games but being okay with that. So like the Resident Evil 4 remake came out, and it's like, yeah, I got I was very lucky, got given a code to play it, streamed it for a couple of hours, played a couple of hours off stream, and then I'm happy. I'm probably not going to finish that game, and it's not because it's not a good game. It's just because like, oh well, then the Diablo beta was out, or like then something else happens and something else comes out. You know, Raven's Watch come out. I'll spend a few hours with that, and it's like I find myself dipping into all of these games, and then that means I have to shut off the part of my brain that handles live service stuff. It's just sort of like, I don't care what's going to come out in future for this game. I'm enjoying it as it is at launch because I like being, in the zeitgeist, like being able to talk about all this stuff. And then I'll just move on and drop it. And so like there's so many games where just because nature, like the keys you get given and stuff like that, I have battle passes or I have the expansions and stuff like Valhalla. I've never played any of the expansions for Valhalla, and I'm not going to. I played through the entire base game because I loved it. I thought it was an amazing game. But it's like that game has taken enough of my time now. I'm sure the expansions are good, but like there's other stuff that I want to play now. And then occasionally a game will get hooked into me. Like occasionally there'll be a game where I'm like, okay, I am going to do everything in this game. Like DMZ, I ended up doing everything for. Diablo 4, that'll be a game that'll keep me going for months and months and months. But then every day or so, there'll be like another game where I'm just like, oh, I'll just give this a try. I'll just play it for a couple of hours. It's why I love it when games come out and I see on a Steam reviews like, oh, it's a great game, but it only takes 4 hours to beat. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I can play this on a Saturday and complete the entire game and just be done. And like, I don't need to.
Vampire Survivors, BAFTA the Game of the Year, people giving it shit saying, but Last of Us, but these other things, these big games. And it's like, yeah, but have you played Vampire Survivors? Because within 10 minutes, you're having more fun than you've ever had in the game. And you're thinking about it for the next 6 hours until you can play it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, that's why it's Game of the Year, because it inspires us so much more than the God of War we know we've already played and we're playing again, but newer, because it's a sequel.
Yeah. It's like all of the excitement this year for
so much.
All of the excitement this year for Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Is like, I loved Spider-Man. It's probably, I think it's the last game that I platinumed, and I adored it. I'm not that excited for Spider-Man 2 because it's going to be more Spider-Man, and I'm sure there'll be another cool story. Yeah. But I have played that game, yeah. And God of War Ragnarok, I wasn't interested. Last of Us Part 2, I would say, was like, I loved that so much more than the first one, and I adored that game. But it was definitely like the sequelitis thing is kind of a game to me is inherently less fun if I've already played it. I would rather move on to something new. Speaking of Game Pass, very briefly, and Vampire Survivors, a game that just came onto Game Pass today, I think, or yesterday, is Loop Hero. And if you have Game Pass, anyone in chat, bloody play it. That's a bit like Vampire Survivors. You'll look at it and probably be like, this is ugly as hell. It's like a bit weird and confusing. But once you understand it, and it'll take like 10 minutes to understand it, you'll be like, this game is amazing. And you'll play it for like 3 or 4 hours. And then you might put it down and never play it again. But you'll have a really cool 3 or 4 hours just really enjoying it. Which is like, that's one of the things that Game Pass is so bloody good at. And it's kind of interesting. Thinking about the whole like games of service thing, that's like almost to me, the sensible evolution, the evolution that I'd like to see happen is what's happened to Game Pass, where it's like, now it's not like one game as a service. It's the idea of having, a subscription-based service to games like Netflix, Amazon Prime, of just being able to like be, okay, I know there's always going to be new games to play. There's always going to be something new to try. But it's at least fresh experiences constantly. And you get that thing we were talking about of with multiplayer games of you want to encourage your friends to play it. It's a lot easier if it's on Game Pass. It's a lot easier to tell people to drop into Sea of Thieves because you can be like, oh, just get a Game Pass subscription for a month. It'll be like, I don't know how much a month is, but it's not much, like a tenner at the most. And it's like, now you can play all of these games and then you can hop from game to game and keep on enjoying them. And it feels, to me at least, it feels a lot less kind of, it doesn't wear me down as much because it's not so much of a fear of missing out. It's just like going into a sweet shop and being like, hey, you can take whatever you want. There's a bunch of stuff here, like just enjoy it. And I really enjoy that kind of idea of a service of just play everything all of the time. It's awesome.
It's fascinating to think that that's the circle that we've gone round on the industry of, we think of Half-Life, and Half-Life was the game, and then it was, okay, that was amazing. It took them all these years to build it. They put it out there. We loved it. And then they went, and here's the expansion pack, and here's the this. And that's how we experienced games then. And then Half-Life tried to innovate and say, episodic games, this is the future. And they weren't wrong. They were ahead of that nature of a streaming service coming out where you subscribe to your Netflix, and it's this week an episode of this, and then next week you'll get the next episode. And then Netflix decided, actually, episodic doesn't work because people don't want to wait. And people hype themselves up for the episode. The episode's too short. And it's like, when's the next one? And it works with TV because you can get away one a week with that. But with video games, Half-Life episode 1 to episode 2, it wasn't that bad, but it was still about a year or 2 years.
2 to 3's been a bit of a wait, though.
2 to 3's been, we're still waiting on that one. Then we've obviously got to this point where if you develop Assassin's Creed Odyssey and then get to Valhalla, it's 3-4 years. Valhalla to what the new one's going to be this year is another 3 to 4 years. Baldur's Gate, you just talked about that one and how they've had an early access model. We again have so much time in our lives to sit and play a game. And if you go, but this game takes 80 hours to complete, what if they could release it to you in a chapter? Yeah. And what if they could say, this chapter takes 4 hours to complete? You'd play it on a Sunday, wouldn't you? You'd have
that's what Telltale did,
make
didn't
time
they?
For it. Yeah,
Telltale did it with Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, and that was like when it worked and it was actually regular. So it was like, okay, one coming out a month. That was pretty cool and it worked pretty well. But then they obviously had trouble with like staffing and crunch and stuff like that. Whereas like then some games would be like 6 months between episodes, and other games would like they'd come out almost too quickly, and you'd be like, oh, I haven't caught up with the last one yet, and now I'm feeling a bit behind.
And that's what Game Pass is kind of enabling, really, is that they know that single games can't sustain that development pace and development cycle. So they just try to find these 4 to 5 hour experiences that go, new on our service this month is these 5 games. Here's Loop Hero, here's Vampire Survivors, here's this, here's that, here's Unpacking. And you'll play one of them and go, that was the best 4 hours I've had playing a video game. And then you'll look forward to the next time they do that. And it's why subscriptions, it's why Game Pass is just... it's unrivaled. Absolutely.
It's like, I wonder how much. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'll have some insight into this, but like, I'd be interested to see what it's like from a development point of view. Of like, if you knew from the moment you started production on a game that it was going to be a Game Pass game, would it change the way you approached it? Would you be like, hey, this might be better if we keep it like, you know, a short, like really good experience. You know, we keep it to like a 5-6 hour story that's amazing. Like, I don't know if you remember on PlayStation there was the Order 1886 was a game where it's like super polished and quite, you know, visually impressive game. I thought it was a lot of fun. But it was like 4 hours long and everyone was like, oh my god, this is like insane that you're releasing a full price game for that. But on Game Pass, if I could get experiences like that were like 4 hours long, I would absolutely love it.
You take them, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for developers, it's nice because I imagine the deals for them are structured in a way where it's a guaranteed income. It's no matter what, we're buying your game. You can still sell your game on other platforms if you want to. I don't think Game Pass operate exclusivity, so they can still make their money selling it on Switch. But they say, here's, say, £100,000 for your game, and we're giving it to you today. And they're like, £100,000. That's amazing. That's covered our 3-person development team salary. That's took the burden away from this. We've got private investment on that. Wow, we don't need to worry about how we're going to pull this off now.
Yeah.
And they can just make the thing they want to make and then think to themselves afterwards of the money that we needed to keep behind in our business plan. Why can we reinvest that? Can we make this better? Can we hire a better artist to come in from the external world to polish this up a bit more, to make it look more attractive? Can we get a new soundtrack done? Can we think about building a DLC for it that we never had envisioned because we didn't know if the game would be successful? Because we could start the DLC today if that's the case, because John's already finished the code. We're just waiting on Susan to do the art, and we're waiting on Steve to finish this bit. So we don't have to waste time planning out the next thing because we know how much money we've got today. It makes such a difference to game development to have that guaranteed income. You think about Rocket League. Rocket League did that. They were on PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
And it obviously wiped out a huge amount of revenue for them. We've no idea what that PlayStation paid for it as a PS Plus game. It wiped out a huge potential revenue for them, but it exposed them to so many more that PC sales went through the roof.
And Fall Guys did the same, didn't it? That was the same.
Fall Guys
same
did
deal.
the same, yeah. It just pushed up the other platforms to a level where whatever they did think they were going to lose, their initial projection of we're making a fun rocket football game, car football game, we're probably going to sell, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 units, and we'll be happy with that. That covers the cost of our simple game. Suddenly they had millions of players, and it's like, okay, yeah, this paid off for us. This paid off big time.
And then they kept it going with a live service thing. Weirdly, bringing it back round. They decided to do Battle Pass, but it also enables studios, like big studios, to take much bigger risks. Like Obsidian making Pentiment is like such a good argument for Game Pass existing. It's like there's no way Obsidian ever would have got the green light to go ahead with Pentiment. It's like, hey, we want to do a medieval illuminated manuscript game where it's kind of a detective mystery and it's about the church, and it's actually got a lot of like historical factual accuracy about the way the church works. And
that's
it's like
a tough sell, isn't it?
Yeah, like that's not something that it's like, who are you making this game for exactly? But because it's on Game Pass, people give it a try and they're like, oh, this is actually really cool. And I'm sure it was someone's passion project. I'm sure there was someone at Obsidian was like, hey, now Microsoft owners, can I make that thing? Like, can I make that thing I've wanted to make for my entire life? And it's just like, it's so cool that stuff like that can exist. And it does make you wonder, like, what are those conversations like at Activision? Or what are those conversations like at EA, where they don't have that kind of security? You know, they do need to sell the games, like, and they do need to find ways to monetize them. Is there someone at Infinity Ward being like, hey, I'd really like to make this game. This is a really cool idea, but there's not much of an audience for it. Activision just happened to be like, no. Make Call of Duty, make Modern Warfare 3. Like, we need to keep the billions of dollars coming in. We can't,
and because it costs so much to make one game these days. Both in terms of the development time. The development time on a game is going to be somewhere like 4 to 5 years when you're at AAA, especially. That's going to require X hundred people working on it. It's like the movie studio argument of, we get the same film over and over again. It's like, yeah, but they make money. The Marvel enterprise, the Marvel juggernaut, you would do it if you can guarantee, well, Marvel has a fan base of X, and we know that if we pump $150 million into making this one movie, but it's going to make $1 billion at the box office, of course you're going to do that.
Yeah.
And you're going to do that way more than you're going to say, my project costs $50 million to develop. It's half the cost. Yeah, but what's it going to make? $220 million? That's still an enormous profit return, but that's, you know, a film production studio of some 100 people. That's some talented VFX artists working on, that's these actors, it's these people. It's resource that you could allocate into the safe project that's going to give you $1 billion no matter what.
Yeah.
And they'll take safe over risk any day of the week because the margins are so much higher. It's a shame because it's what kills creativity, and it's why I value so much more of what happens in the indie game development space more than I ever have, because we don't get that innovation at AAA. We see it work the other way, where the proving ground is indie. The proving ground is like your Tarkov, which for all of the many faults that game may have, and the sins it commits in its universe to its fans, Tarkov is an innovation. They proved a concept that, again, no one would have believed worked if you explained it to them however many years ago before it launched. And now it's like, but we've made DMZ and it's one of the most popular things.
Yeah.
Like, as much as it's not the most popular component of Call of Duty, relative to the rest of the industry, more people are playing DMZ than any other extractor
compared
shooter.
to like Division 2 or something like that, which was, you know, another AAA thing. But like Call of Duty have looked at Tarkov and been like, oh, this is what you need to do. Like, this is what you need to fix. But
and they're still perfecting it. That's still the first generation of, say, extraction games where it's, we think we've found what's good about it, and then really DMZ2 is going to be the next best version of that thing. That's
or Sea of Thieves 2
really
or the Division 3 or so someone else. Come on. And it's interesting, like, you know, we're talking about that Ubisoft, going back to what we were saying before, they actually do like the best of both worlds in a way that they make Assassin's Creed Valhalla that will make them $1 billion. And then they can spend some of that money making For Honor, making Roller Champions, making Riders Republic, like something that they know is risky. They know it might not work. I know, you know, you hear of so many Ubisoft games that get cancelled. And in some ways, I think that's, you know, it must suck for the people working on it. But it's a kind of a positive thing that it means that they were building something that they were like, we don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to like put resources in it. We're going to give it a go. And, you know, we'll make 20 games and 5 of them will end up coming out. But like, that's still cool that they're trying it. And I think EA do it with EA Originals, don't they? Where they fund like indie studios.
They fund indie studios.
Like Unravel and stuff like that.
Games that they were going to make it anyway. Maybe not to the same level, maybe not to the same polish. But games like It Takes Two were going to get made regardless. The difference is how quickly they could make it and with how much polish. Like, Josef Fares, the studio director, has famously talked about the relationship he has with EA, because he's the person who, at the end of the day, didn't have a studio, didn't have PCs, didn't have desks, didn't have a roof over his head to make the game. And DICE and EA said, well, we've got space, we've got room. If you've got a team,
they actually used their studios.
Come in and use the space. Like, that was originally where It Takes Two got made. It got made in Stockholm. And they're still based in Sweden. The developers of It Takes Two, Hazelight, but they used to use the office until they got on their feet and did the thing they were going to do anyway. They used obviously whatever financing they got from their deal with EA to fund the development of their studio, to recruit more talent, to do the next thing that they would have done regardless, but they got to do it faster because they got that leg up from someone saying, we support your vision. We need this and we want this to be associated with what we do because we value your creativity. So how much do you need to finish your game? I'm sure there's business deals in the back end of, okay, we're going to take 5% of this, 10% of that, and we want first refusal on X, Y, and Z in the future, and let it kind of grow from there. It works out for everyone involved. Like, obviously, like, he doesn't strike you as a man when you see him talk in interviews about, you know, I want to work for the big evil corporation. He doesn't seem like the man who kind of tolerate that, but he clearly respects that he has the ability to make the game he wants to make. And if someone's going to give him the financial safety net underneath to keep his staff paid in the interim, you'd be mad not to take that kind of deal.
So maybe we need these games as a service to fund other stuff. Maybe that's it.
That's probably the thing. And again, as much as Marvel criticism works like that, if you follow all the money train of Disney down through the various entities it supports, Disney does invest in creative projects. Disney does take risk in different places, and Disney does do that. And it probably is the same for video game development, because you do reach a point, and it's probably the case at Epic especially, where if Fortnite's bringing in, making up numbers, $100 million a month or $100 million a quarter, when someone sticks their hand up and says, can I have $250,000 to make this thing? They're like, yeah, sure. Probably hang on. Yeah, how's that? Take that. Whatever. Sure. Yeah. Call me later. And then they come back later and says, here you go. I made you $1 million. They're like, yeah, sure. I don't care. But it's irrelevant to them. You know?
Weirdly, I remember like going off on a little bit of a tangent. When I was a teacher, I used to work in a really rural Norfolk school where we didn't have a lot of money, and we did very, very well for like by the kids and everything like that, but we didn't have a lot of money. And a lot of the time you'd come up with ideas about stuff you wanted to try, and they'd be like, oh, sorry, we can't afford it. And that sucked. And then I moved to, when I moved to London, I worked in a big academy chain school.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do this weird thing where I was like, hey, I know some people who work at IGN. Could I get them to come in and like do a thing on video games writing with the kids, you know, journalism and stuff like that? It's gonna cost this much money to do blah, blah, blah. And the guy who was like the bursar for the school was like, my budget is $25 million for the year. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, oh, wow. And it's like, before that, I'd really resented working for the big academy chain, but it was like, I could just do whatever I wanted. Like, they didn't care about the money at all. And that was quite nice in a way. I do wonder if like we'll ever see that from Activision. Like, you know, like Call of Duty being the biggest property, you know, other than maybe Take-Two and Rockstar and stuff like that. It's like, it's interesting that as far as I know, they don't really have the indie side of stuff. You know, Activision Blizzard released very few games compared to Ubisoft, EA. Like,
it's quality and polish for them. You're right.
Yeah.
They aren't operating in that risk space as much. And maybe it was because, again, this Microsoft deal still, it's yet to happen.
Yeah.
When it happens, maybe that's when they go, right, okay, let's get these projects back out the cabinet and let's review them again and let's approve.
Oh, it'd be so cool. It'd be so cool if we suddenly saw like, you know, Treyarch doing a zombies only game because they can, because it doesn't matter if it makes money, if it's on Game Pass, or like, you know, Sledgehammer making something else, you know, like some of the old games that they used to make. Raven making a new Rogue Company. Like, they'll just like go out and do whatever they want. That would be absolutely awesome. Anyway, that is the end of our time this week. Massive thank you, Freeman, for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. That's been awesome.
Lovely to chat to you, buddy.
Yeah, lovely conversation. Really enjoyed that. And thank you to everyone that's been watching. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. And if you want to see these recorded live, we do it at 9 o'clock every weekday morning. So thank you very much once again, and goodbye.